is the I Read Comic Books podcast. I am your host, Mike Rappin. Joining me this week, two CGI Spartans at the Battle of Thermopylae, Nick White.
Oh boy, I don't even know where to go with that, but welcome everyone.
And Paul Jaisley.
Hello, humanoids. So happy to be here today.
I am very excited. Everyone, I don't know if you know this. This is episode 300, the official episode 300 of I Read Comic Books. I think the intro here may have hinted at something that's going to be coming later in the episode. But today, we are here to talk about comic books as usual. I mean, two things, I guess, before I get started. One, our Discord book club is coming back October 23rd, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard on Discord. We're going to be talking about Monstrous Volume 1. So if you want to get in on that, make sure you're on the Discord. Come hang out with us. It's going to be great. I also want to shout out our latest Patreon supporter and member of the IRCB Inner Circle, ? More to come on that. Shout out to Jules. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining the Patreon. But yeah, let's just get into this. You know, this is episode 300. It's a big deal. We're going to talk about everything that's coming down the line with I Read Comic Books in the near future later. But you know what? I think people are here for one reason, and that's here to talk about comic books. So I got to ask these legally mandated questions. How have you been? How have comic books been? Let's start with you, Paul.
Well, Mike, I wasn't supposed to say anything. It's supposed to be a secret, but I figured episode 300 is a perfect time to make this exclusive announcement. You hear it first. I'm going to be the next James Bond.
Oh my
surprise.
Finally, the reveal right here, so, exclusive.
You know, I was surprised. I didn't even audition, but they wanted to take the franchise in a different direction. So I'm pretty excited. So yeah, we'll see how that goes.
I mean, they're always trying to push for like a lower profile actor that people go, well, I can see this person as James Bond because it doesn't have that baggage of like, oh, I'm always seeing George Clooney or whatever. So, I mean, I guess maybe they decided to like just go one step further than like, oh, you know, this is kind of an unknown actor and just
I mean, with no acting experience and no interest in James Bond as a franchise, I guess they were tired of the fitted suit look, and they really want to go with the James Bond who wore skinny jeans and Dinosaur Jr. t-shirts.
I like that.
And I really fit that. So yeah.
And just like a great politician, you know, you never want to have someone who wants the role. You instead want someone who refuses it and must take it up for the greater good. So Paul, this is great. I'm really happy for you.
Yeah.
Man.
So in a couple of years, you know, you'll see me on the big screen, hopefully. So there we go. In all seriousness, I've been doing well. I recently moved to a new apartment, which meant I had to basically move all of my comics, which is, as you probably are familiar, is very backbreaking and tedious, and didn't give me a lot of time to actually read some comics, but I wanted to take time to read some stuff to talk about today. So these are two things I read over the weekend before we recorded that I want to talk about. First one is the book Mano del Destino, which is an OGN from Image. Came out about a month or two ago. It's pretty recent. And it's written and drawn by an artist named Jay Gonzo. And this book is set in 1960s Mexico City, and it chronicles the wild world of lucha libre. So, of course, is right at my alley.
Hell yeah.
The titular character, Mano del Destino, is a luchador whose friends turned on him and unmasked him. He was humiliated. So he ends up making a Faustian sort of deal, bargain with the devil, so to speak, to get a new persona, a new mask, and some basically superpowers to get revenge on the evil manager Jefe and his stable of rudos, you know, evil heel wrestlers, luchadors. Mm-hmm. As the story goes on, Mano del Destino becomes like a folk hero fighting for the honor of his people. He gets a sort of mentor that helps him train, and he fights through this stable of rudos in order to get his revenge. And at the end, he has to choose, do I want a definitive revenge, or am I willing to stand up for what's right and do the right thing? It's a really, really well done story. I really enjoyed it. Obviously, anything that combines comics and wrestling, I'm going to enjoy anyway. But what I liked about this book in particular was Gonzo's art style. Every aesthetic choice of this book is designed to emulate Silver Age or, you know, mid-century Mexican culture. So the architecture of the buildings, the clothes people wear, the design of the costumes for the luchadors, the coloring, the way the pages are printed, they have that distressed look. And every chapter has like a cover page basically, and it's sort of designed to look like a Gold Key comic, not even Marvel or DC, but like a Silver Age off-brand, you know, sort of comic. The color palette is really beautiful. His line work reminds me of Michael Cho, if you're familiar with his work, where it's Kirby influence without feeling like an homage directly. You know, it's a thick, dark, line, very Silver Age, but with a contemporary sort of feel and aesthetic. And what's great is that when he does these sort of the lucha libre sequences, the wrestling scenes, he draws them like superhero fights. They're super kinetic, super action-packed. It doesn't look sort of stiff and staged like sometimes drawing action or sports can look on a comic book page.
Mm-hmm.
And just, I mean, the whole story is sort of geared toward that. And then at the end, there's an interesting subtext about, you know, the main character's history and the history of Mexico as a country and the tendency for there to be strong-armed dictators taking over that country or ruling parts of Latin America. Or Central America. So he becomes a hero for the people. And like, there's an interesting political subtext, a part of that. And what's great is at the end of the story, Gonzo does a very extensive background piece, a long essay in the back of the book where he explains every aesthetic choice of the book and what it means to him and what it meant to portray a contemporary version of Mexican culture that didn't feel like a throwback or no one's wearing sombreros. Like there's nothing sort of stereotypical. And it's a celebration of a very particular aesthetic and style in Mexican history. And I really appreciate it because of that. It's one of those books that I read digitally and want to go by and buy a copy of it just to see how it looks on the page and just revisit it because it was a really, really enjoyable read.
Yeah, it looked, just from the cover, it looks beautiful. I think, yeah, Paul, you sold me. I think you sold some other folks in the chat too. So like,
yeah, okay, cool.
Way to go.
This is definitely one of those things where like it feels like people are tapping into Paul's brain in ways that are just too uncomfortably honed in. Like, I know we talked about in the past that like, gee, Paul's looking for this weird Kirby book and then it magically appears in the shop. And then I warned Paul that maybe he was part of some bigger conspiracy. Yes. And clearly people are now reading his thoughts. I know, Paul, you said you recently moved. Was the rate like really too good? Was it too uncomfortably good to believe? Like, I'm just trying to build this all, put this all together. How big are the drapes? Like, because they probably should be completely covering what windows.
Drapes? What drapes? Wow. No, I don't want to get into it. I did look into this place. So Nick, you're actually making me suspect the circumstances of my move. So
well, before we make part of the Department of Truth,
listen, before we get too deep into this, Paul, do you read anything else you want to talk about?
Yes. Let's move on. I read another OGN that came out recently. It's called Onion Skin. This was originally published in Mexico, I think last year, and then Top Shelf published the English translation earlier this year. It's by an artist named Edgar Camacho, and he's a newer up-and-coming Mexican comic book artist. And this book is, I think, one of his first things he did. It's a story about a man who's a graphic designer by trade. He's very tired of his job. He doesn't have his heart isn't into it. And he ends up basically breaking his arm in a way to kind of stop working, to avoid having to work. And through a series of circumstances, he ends up befriending a woman at a concert. They decide to throw all caution to the wind and start a food truck. And there's a lot of interesting background here of like, maybe this was his destiny all along to start this food truck. This woman he met, he has dreams about maybe he met her before. They have a deeper connection than he realizes. Their food truck is very successful. She has a special herb that she puts in all the food that people really enjoy. It's very unique and it gives their food a distinct taste. And along the way, they end up falling afoul of another food truck, a rival vendor who is protected by a biker gang, and they have to fight off this biker gang. So there's sort of a lot going on in this story, but what I really liked was Camacho's artwork. It reminded me of Kevin Cannon, another cartoonist who does a sort of artwork it sort of looks simple and cartoony on the surface, but it's very purposefully designed and drawn. There's moments where there's an action scene, and instead of it being an onomatopoeia sort of sound effect, it's a verb of what's happening, which is something that Kevin Cannon does in a lot of his work. And the color scheme, it's a lot of earth tones, very pleasing, warm colors. It's a really lovely looking book. I guess my only complaint would be the resolution feels very quick. Like, I feel like maybe there was something missing. You know, I had to kind of go back and read, like, did I miss something? There was a moment I missed, but that's a very minor complaint in the large scale appeal of the book. I think aesthetically it's very nice. And again, it's when I was thinking about these two books that I read and wanted to talk about, they both are examples of, you know, Hispanic artists or Mexican artists who are trying to present something that doesn't feel stereotypically Mexican. Like this book,
Sure.
it's a celebration of Mexican food and Mexican cuisine, but it's set in contemporary times, and it doesn't lay into a lot of stereotypical, aesthetic designs. It feels unique, contemporary, very modern. Same thing with Mano del Destino. It's a very distinct, modern, contemporary feel to the book. Both books really celebrate uniquely Mexican cultural aspects, food and lucha libre, in a very pleasing aesthetic style. So I didn't really even realize the connection until I was talking about them just now. But those are the two books I read. So I guess there was a reason behind talking about both these today.
Yeah, I mean, they both sound amazing for sure.
And I know that you said obviously that it feels like the ending maybe was like unsatisfactory, but is it really an indie comic book unless you feel like the last 15 pages were torn out by someone else? And
yeah,
wow.
I mean, that's a very particular aesthetic and experience I've had reading a lot of books. But I think Camacho is a very good artist. I'm very curious to see where his career goes. I know this book, when it came out in Mexico, got a lot of praise. He's a big up and coming artist there, so this is nice to see one of his books translated to English. And again, Top Shelf is a big publisher for that. So they have a big outreach and a big spread and a big a footprint, so to speak. So excited to see what he does in the future.
Yeah, well, let's move on to Nick. How have you been? What comic books are you going to tell us about that have perfectly understandable endings?
Okay, I just want to say this up front, all right? Because clearly, based on the chat, I'm really garnering some praise here. I'm okay with those endings. I want those endings. The idea of like, well, what happens next? Like, I'm okay with that. As someone who procrastinates and doesn't always get things exactly how I want them, the idea that things don't get completed is perfectly fine by me. That's my own life. So, now that everyone made it personal. So let's see. West Michigan Weather Watch, rain, lots of rain recently. Super humid. It's been very weird. It's definitely like the first couple steps into fall, but not to a point where it's like the colors are changing and it's just sort of brisk. It's just that weird summer fall mishmash that we get in Michigan. Other than that, it is football season. Michigan won, Michigan State won, Iowa won. We won't talk about Ohio State. And in terms of what I read, I know this is a book quite a few people have probably read at this point. So I know this isn't a hot take, but guys, Reckless is really, really good. This is the second time I've read it. I'm rereading it because I have the second volume on my plate, and I said, well, I might as well at least just go reread the first. I really, really enjoy this book. For those not aware, who have been living under a rock that's probably under a larger sized rock.
Sure. In the comics world.
Yeah. This is written by Ed Brubaker, drawn by Sean Phillips, with colors by Baby Phillips Jr. That's Jacob Phillips. That's Sean's son. This is the nickname I've chosen for him.
You can't give Jacob Phillips John Romita Jr.'s nickname because it doesn't work. JR only works because his name is John Romita Nick.
Baby Jacob's Dinosaur Jr. Baby Jacob Phillips Dinosaur Jr. I mean, this isn't the problem, right? They say that the only rule of nicknames is that you can't give yourself the nickname. So as long as I'm giving the nickname, it's okay.
Okay.
Anyway. Yeah, so I think most people kind of know the general aesthetic, tone, feel of Brubaker Phillips' works. Typically noir, crime, pretty grounded in reality, although frequently most of them have a little nuanced twist, whether that's Fatale, which I think you could argue is actually more ungrounded than not.
Fatale's the only one.
That's like super loopy, but like Killer Be Killed, Criminal, things like that. Sure. There's always something going on. And when I was rereading it, I was just really thinking about it. And I think that this is really a really perfect gateway book to try to get people into comics and I've had a couple people like this that I've tried to convince, and they, said I'm not really interested in comics and no one's ever heard of them again. But for the people who did listen to me, it's just hyper grounded. And so the people who are like, I don't want capes, I don't want super heroics, I don't want crazy powers, I just want something that reflects reality, to which I say, you basic, I guess. But
wow.
I really, really love this book. And I think it might be my favorite work by these creators.
Yeah, I can absolutely understand that. This book is definitely them honing their craft to the most perfect that it's been. I can't think of a book that has better delivered on a story, on the artwork. This book is
Pulp
fantastic.
is tricky, right? Because they've put out 2 absolute frickin' bangers within the last year and a half.
Sure.
And I think the obvious thing that really makes these 2 for me the best is just the addition of Jacob Phillips. Jacob Phillips Jr., baby Jacob, our colorist. Honestly, I prefer Jacob over Brett Weiser, who was doing a lot of the coloring work for Brubaker and Phillips with their recent works. Obviously, that's not happening anymore. We're not going to touch that topic. I can only handle so much controversy in one day. But honestly, like, I can't recommend this work enough. It's such a good noir, and it's kind of like the inverse of a lot of noir that we see, where everything is like dark alleys and, you know, all this shady stuff going on. This is like all happening within this sort of sun-bleached, you know, everybody cover your eyes and don't look at the sun LA, where everything's just, it's not that everything's sort of shrouded in darkness, it's that everything is just too bright. And Jacob Phillips' color palette for these books is just, it's like bright pinks, it's bright purples, it's like really neon. I love it. I love it. If you're not getting in on this, you need to get in on this. Nick, how are they putting out 3 OGNs in a year? I have no freaking clue how this...
They're very good. They're very
good. They're very good.
They're very good.
Well, I want to say very quickly, like, what I like about this book in particular is that a lot of Phillips and Brubaker's other work is clearly homages to certain genres, and this book in particular feels like Brubaker wants to do this sort of pulp hero or like detective hero like Parker, you know, if you've read the Richard Stark stuff, but he's doing it in his own way. It's like, I'm not going to set it in the 50s or 60s. It's going to be set in the 80s. It's going to be in this, you know, brightly lit, you know, Hollywood aesthetic. It's going to have these particular markers. It's kind of going to be like the Rockford Files, but not that much like the Rockford Files. Like, and it really feels like something that is, they've absorbed all of their influence to the point when they do something like this, it feels wholly formed in their own, even though you can see what influenced them at the same time. You know, that makes sense?
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that. Like most salient points that Paul takes, where he condenses my rambling for 8 minutes and turns it into a 30-second sound clip that will probably get aired in place of it.
That's what I'm here to do, Nick. We're to give you the too long didn't read version. Yeah.
Anything else that you've been reading, Nick, though?
Yeah, I'll briefly touch on this other book I actually read last night called Yojimbot. I read the first 2 issues. This is written and drawn by Sylvain Repo. I'm sorry, your name is French, and I probably just totally butchered it. Apologies. At least I didn't pronounce the S at the end of your name. So, and colors by Noiri. Again, sorry. So obviously this title is a portmanteau of robot and rabbit, which we all know from reading Usagi Yojimbo.
I don't know if a lot of people, I don't know. People might not know. I'm just saying.
Which is weird because the main robot character nearly looks like or behaves like a rabbit. So false advertising. I'm just kidding. Yojimbo means bodyguard. So Usagi Yojimbo meaning rabbit bodyguard. So right. So it's a portmanteau of robot and bodyguard. Makes a lot more sense. This is Repo's first graphic novel. It came out this year. It was originally released in France by Dagard Comics as an OGN and then imported into English via Europe Comics, who also knew that Americans wouldn't know what to do with the work unless it was split into 3 segments of 50 pages apiece, because we don't know how to handle that otherwise. So they split it into 3 issues. They're all currently on sale on Comixology right now. So if you're interested, get in on this. The book sort of kicks off with that typical energetic fight you normally see. You've got these 2 robots dressed like wandering swordsmen from Japan during the feudal era. And one of them even has that big round straw hat that covers his eyes. So you got that sort of menacing, what's this guy up to sort of look. Like, is there rain pouring down? Yeah. Is there a pagoda in the background as lightning strikes and they cross swords? Yes, absolutely. And like as it slowly starts to veer way too much towards like, is this too much wish fulfillment? Right? Like, am I getting everything I think would be super cool all at once? The book sort of has a twist and shows that there's maybe some substance in addition to all of the massive amount of style that you're getting front loaded into this book. You sort of follow this robot named Mobile Unit 63, and also this young child named Hiro who's trying to escape with his dad from some place called the base. It's in like near future Japan. These people are hunting them, and we know that Hiro's dad was like a scientist, but we don't know what he was working on. And they're trying to bring them back to the base, and this robot protects them, and the dad dies. Which, let it be said, if you're a parental figure and like a surrogate robot parental figure comes into the scene, like, get out of there. You're going to end up dead. It's not looking good for you. And so, yeah, this robot kind of becomes this parental figure to this kid and is going to try to help reunite him with these other people. I mean, the beginning is more, I'd say, tried and true than cliche. I think it works. What helps is just that the color palette for this book, for like a post-apocalyptic story, the color palette's amazing. It's bright, it's energetic, the panel work is great, the robot designs are fantastic. And a lot of the book is largely silent because the robot doesn't talk. And when I told all of this to Mike, he said, okay, so this book is basically WALL-E. And I said, yes, it's WALL-E if WALL-E also managed to bisect someone vertically with a sword halfway through the book. So if that sounds appealing...
I mean... did that not happen in the version of WALL-E that you guys watched?
I didn't.
Director's cut.
Yeah.
Look, the Blu-ray was $7 extra, and I just said I'm not going there. So if that was there, I missed it.
People are very upset in the chat that we're talking about WALL-E killing people.
I would have probably seen
thoughts?
it if that had been the case.
If you ask someone to take out the trash for how many decades in a row, they're gonna lose it at some point. It's just natural.
Yeah. Any last thoughts on this book, Nick? Before I can talk about what books I've been reading.
I had a lot of fun with this. It was a real diamond in the rough. I know 2 people on Discord have already bought copies. So that person whose French name I butchered, I do expect like a 10% cut for the finder's fee.
All right.
Mike, what have you read? How have comic books been on this 300th episode, and maybe my last if we keep this up?
Yeah, Nick, you're really pushing it. So this week, I mean, I've been super busy. I don't know if you guys have been listening to all the interviews that we've been doing, but I've been just stacking up interviews nonstop and trying to get a bunch of really cool stuff in for the future of the show, like future episodes way into like late October and November and stuff. And planning out stuff that we're going to do for this episode. We've got a really cool interview segment that's going to take place after the break. We're going to do some talking between the 3 of us here, but then there's a really cool edited thing that Xander's putting together. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. But for me, I've also been reading comics. I've managed to read a couple of things that are pretty good. One of which was the T-Dragon Society. This is by Kay O'Neill. I don't know if I need to say anything else about this other than it is probably one of the nicest comics I've read in a long time. I think everybody else who's read and talked about this on the show has said that they loved it. I absolutely fell head over heels in love with just the cuteness and the really wonderful character development that happens in this book. The world that this story takes place in makes me want to play a really like laid back, chill D&D game where you're kind of just doing nice things for your neighbors and make that into the game. But anyways, I really liked it. Not much else to say other than that. I think everybody should read this book. It's a perfect all ages story that has a very diverse set of characters and a really interesting story altogether. A beautiful little world. Highly recommend that one. The other book I'll say really quick, I read Inferno #1. I think this is my pick last week. This is Hickman, Valero Sietti, David Curiel on colors, Joe Sabino. All I can say is that I want the drama, the X-Men drama that is here, this idea of Mystique asking the question, why can't you resurrect the person that I love? Being the biggest question I think that the X-Men have posed so far. Like, there have been a lot of really crazy things that's been happening since the Jonathan Hickman era with the dawn of X. This question of Mystique saying, hey, where is Destiny? Where is my wife? And the reason she hasn't been brought back is spoilers, I mean, for those of you who've read House of X, Powers of X, she's a precog, and that kind of messes with the overall Hoxpox Dawn of X world for reasons that you need to read the comics to kind of get. But it's a really interesting thing. And Mystique being Mystique, who kind of is like, fuck you, you're going to tell me, or I'm going to put a gun in your mouth. It makes Inferno #1 really interesting. I'll just say that. Inferno #1, fantastic little book. Cinco, I'm intentionally ignoring Nick right now. So
can I ask you, is it Powers of X? Because I've heard that
it's Powers of 10.
The
I
real
refuse to
fans
say
Powers of 10.
I fucking refuse to say it. It's PO, like Powers of X. Just, it's fine. I don't care. All the X-Men fans, they're gonna come after me for this. They're not listening to the show. They've already given up. But if they listen to this episode, I feel really bad. Anyways, the last book I do want to talk about. Cinco, technically it's Powers of Decem. Get out of here. Today, the last book I want to talk about is Witch Hat Atelier Volume 8. This is Eisner Award-winning, Harvey Award-winning Witch Hat Atelier. Probably my favorite manga series that's being published, period. This is Kamami Shirahama. This book's beautiful, fantastic. It's cute. It's got a really interesting world. The art is so unbelievably spectacular. I don't know what else to say about this book other than if you haven't read it, I highly recommend just trying Volume 1. I think Shirahama's art will sell you, and I think the really interesting, unique world that she creates for this book will keep you wanting to read. The basic idea being that a young girl, she finds a spell book. She's given a spell book by a strange person in a hat at a festival, and she tries to perform magic. And in doing so, she actually petrifies her. She accidentally petrifies her mom. Another
and
witch
their house.
All right, Nick. Another witch shows up and says, hey, normally we would wipe your memory, but I think there's something special here. And he brings her under his wing and takes her back to his atelier to teach her to become a witch. And she learns all about the intricate world of magic. And this book has continued to be amazing. Volume 8 in particular had moments where I don't think that Shirahama needed to go as fucking hard as she did. There are pages where they're just talking about like basic things, and in the background there are just these full page or third page or half page just spreads of very intricate, detailed art. And I know that she's done this in other volumes, but I felt it particularly hard in this one, that she was just going all out with every piece of art. Every time she had the opportunity to do something intricate for a metaphor or to just show something off, she did. And this is the best volume yet. Next volume comes out in June, and I cannot fucking wait. That's all I got to say about that. If I haven't convinced you, there's no hope for you yet.
I mean, it's a beautiful book.
I forgot that you picked that one up. Yeah. I'm happy. I'm happy that you are.
I'm making all sorts of inroads.
Well, speaking of inroads, let's talk about comic books that are coming out very soon or you're very excited for to read. Whatever's next on the top of your pile, let's dig right into it. So, Paul, why don't you start us off?
Mike, I'm excited to read Defenders #3. I'm really, really enjoying this new Defenders series. I like Weird Marvel, and I feel like Al Ewing has done a great job highlighting Weird Marvel in this book. He's teaming up with the artist Javier Rodriguez. This is one of the best-looking superhero books I've read in a long time. And I like the story. I like the team put together, but really it's Rodriguez's artwork. It's like psychedelic superheroics. You know what I mean? It's like out there and cosmic, but not copying the Kirby cosmic or the Starlin cosmic. It's its own thing, and I really appreciate it because of that. Mm-hmm. So if you don't know who the Defenders are in this particular iteration, Doctor Strange has to put together a ragtag team of heroes, including the Silver Surfer, the Masked Raider, Betty Banner, Cloud, and Galactus's mom as the team. Exactly.
What? Who's Cloud?
That's a character I didn't recognize. So there's again, I'm not too Marvel
big sword?
Well read. No,
Nick.
It's a Mike can explain it off air later. So anyway, they have to chase down a rogue scientist who traveled backwards through time, and in doing so, they cross to the previous versions of reality. Since I guess the 616 Marvel Universe is in the 8th reality, and they're going back into the previous ones where everything's different. Last issue, they ran into an infant who will one day grow up to be Galactus, which, you know, there's that whole question of, would you kill Hitler? Would you kill baby Galactus?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You know, so Silver Surfer wrestles with that. That's where they meet Galactus' mom, who speaks in Kirby-esque. It's amazing. Like the dialogue she has is all exclamation points, all over the top. It's the dialogue from a Kirby comic that she speaks in, which I loved. And that's what I really like about this comic. It's a book that celebrates particular Silver Age aspects. The artwork and the story feels like a mashup of Kirby and Ditko, but without feeling like a straight up homage. Like it's unique in its own way. And it really is one of the funniest books Ewing's done for Marvel. Ewing is a very fun and funny writer, but Immortal Hulk wasn't very funny a lot of the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, didn't really have an opportunity to be so.
Exactly. This book is super fun. It's super funny. I mean, it's one of those books that there's a lot of double page spreads or page layouts where I'll just like stare at the pages just for like 5 or 10 minutes. Like, this is beautiful. And this is something you can only do on a comic books page. You know, it really was one of these books I was reading and thinking, there's no way we could turn this into a movie. It is a comic book and it's celebrating the comic bookiness of itself. So I'm excited to see where Ewing and Rodriguez take it from here.
Paul was like, there's no way this could be turned into a movie. And then he just slammed the issue shut and said, then what is the point? And threw it against the wall.
You know, Javier Rodriguez's art is always spectacular to me. Especially like his Exiles run that he did with Saladin Ahmed was absolutely beautiful. And the way you've been talking about this book recently, I feel like I gotta grab it. I'm probably gonna wait till it's all out. Maybe I'll grab it as a trade. But this sounds like right up my alley for just kind of fun, one and done style stories, especially with the weirdness factor. This sounds really cool.
I think it's a limited series. I think it's only like 5 or 6 issues. Like it's a mini series. So once it's all collected, it's gonna be something you're gonna want to track down for sure.
Absolutely. Nick, what about you? What's on the top of your pile?
Yeah, so for me, there's really nothing that interesting coming out this week. It looked like it was a really, really light week. I don't know if it's one of those weird, like, are there typically when there's like 5 Wednesdays in a month, then it sort of happens. So I'm not sure if that's the case. I didn't sit down and do the math on it. But so for me, there's kind of 2 things on my personal reading horizon that I'm pretty excited for. Obviously, I already mentioned one, which is Reckless Friend of the Devil. And beyond that, I don't know if the solicit still holds true, but I believe the 3rd installment is actually slated to come out in October. The solicit for Friend of the Devil, at least at that point when that solicit was written, said that the 3rd one was coming out in October. So, I mean, there's even more on the horizon if that deadline holds true. Danny says it does. So we'll hold him to that then.
They did it just for my birthday, and I really appreciate Brubaker and Phillips looking out for me this month. Yeah. That's all.
So very excited for that. Still, like, I want to know, like, have they just been working on this for years? Did, the pandemic, for all of the terrible, terrible things it did, like, did it allow them to really, like, double down on this? I don't know. It's just this is like Matt Kint, Charles Soule levels of just churning out stuff. So I'm very impressed because obviously the quality is just so high. So very pumped for that. The other kind of weird oddity that I just haven't gotten around to reading, but it is next on the list for me, is the final issue of The Silver Coin, also from Image Comics. For those unaware, this is a series that has been sort of an anthology where it's one artist and then a rotating stable of writers with Michael Walsh doing all of the art. And then writers such as, I think Jeff Lemire, Kelly Thompson, Ed Brisson, I think, did one of them. And up to this point, I've just been pretty unimpressed with this. So much talent, but I just haven't. I don't know if the format is flawed. I don't think it is. I think it's neat to have like sort of a stationary artist and rotating writers, because I feel like normally you get the reverse, where it's like, hi guys, I'm the writer, this is my magnum opus, and we're going to rotate some artists through or something like that. And again, I don't want to say this is like a flawed idea, but I've been pretty underwhelmed by this. The 5th issue is supposed to divulge the origins of this cursed coin, which we see in all of these different eras with all of these different protagonists. This has gone into the far-flung future. This final issue is supposed to go into the past. For those who aren't aware, it's your typical, like, oh, I got my hands on the coin and, like, I really want to make this wish happen, or I really wish X would happen. And then, of course, the coin grants the wish, but with, you know, some warped or twisted, be careful what you wish for. Yeah.
It's Leprechaun logic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm hoping
The movie series Leprechaun. I just want to be clear.
Right,
The movie series.
just leprechauns in general. Mike just really has it out for just leprechauns at large.
Yes, yes.
But I hope this ties it together. I hope this gets better, because I've heard that I think partway through releasing the single issues that this series got greenlit to go to ongoing. So,
Yeah.
gosh, I mean, yeah, fingers crossed.
I will say I've enjoyed this series overall, but I can see all of your criticisms. I think it might have worked better as oversized issues, because just the standalone stories themselves have been
They
felt
feel
a little flat.
rushed.
Except
You know
for
what I
Zdarsky's story, which is perfect. I don't understand how you fucking nail number one and the rest of them just feel like super flat after that.
That's
I
a
don't
good
even
point.
remember
That
what
my favorite issue.
was Zdarsky's. Who
It was
got
about
the
the
coin?
musician.
Is the
The
cool
musician?
guitar one?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, that was
Yeah.
fine.
That
Yeah.
was really good. I think the thing is that they're all supposed to function as standalone 20-page stories, but they don't always have a satisfying conclusion in those 20 pages. So I just wonder if reading this in a collection would be more satisfying than reading it month to month.
Yeah, maybe.
And again, I have enjoyed it as standalone stories, but I can see all of your criticisms that you're saying. So I don't know.
I mean, I feel like we so rarely get anthology format at this point that it's like I don't want to come down on this book too hard, because like,
Well, I don't want to. We've spent a lot of time.
yeah,
I do want to talk about this because I really have a lot of thoughts about Silvercoin.
sure.
Nick, you'll have to read the last issue, and then you have to let us know after you finish it how you feel about the series overall.
Well,
how about that?
Let me ask you this: do you think the 5th issue, right? You know,
No, I'll just say that. Whatever question you were going to ask, I'm confident that the answer is no.
Yeah,
because I read it and I've a lot of thoughts about that, but I'm going to just blanket no, and you get back to me once you finish.
All right.
Really quick. So Discord. So we have so many people on Discord today. I can't even begin to thank you all. You're all fantastic. I love all of you. We have a bunch of picks. What's on the top of everybody's pile from the Discord. Kara is very excited for Elsa Chartier and Pietrick Colonet's Inktober OGN, which is happening right now on Kickstarter. This isn't like a plug. Just you should go back that. Elsa's amazing. Cinco's excited to read Immortal Hulk number 40 through 49. Danny's going to be reading Are You Afraid of Dark Side number 1. Xander's rereading all of Die. So am I. High five. Didn't know that was happening, but I'm glad that's happening for both of us. Kyle is catching up on Kaiju number 8, and Stephanie is jumping into Hat Atelier. Stephanie, I'm so happy for you. If I missed anybody, I apologize. Let me know. But my pick for this week, I guess the book that's on the top of my pile that I'm going to be reading that's coming out this Tuesday because it's a DC book. This is Soul Plumber number 1, written by Marcus Parks, Henry Zabrowski, and Ben Kissel, the guys who make the Last Podcast on the Left podcast. I'm excited because this sounds goofy, and I like to support those guys because I have no soul for the most part because their show is insane. The art in this book is done by John McCrea, and or maybe McCrea. I don't know how to say his name.
He's great.
He is Stu fucking Pendis. Holy shit. Google this guy. His art is insane. I don't know much about what the series is going to be other than it's about like exorcism and Satan and some sewer dwelling mischief. And John McCrea is going to be drawing all of it. And I mean, listeners of the Last Podcast on the Left are probably going to be picking this up, and I'm guessing it's going to be fun. But I'm biased as I'm someone who listens to their show and really enjoys their very dark sense of humor.
This isn't about Mario?
Strangely enough, no. That would star Chris Pratt, actually.
That's right.
Anyways, John McCrea, though, on art is wild because if you look up this guy's stuff, it's bonkers. It's really like surreal stuff that's mixed with hyper realistic art. And it kind of reminds me of, strangely enough, Brian and I read this Lobo comic for like a holiday special that we did this past year. And it reminds me a lot of that, where there's like this really highly detailed, realistic look mixed with absolute insane, like, surrealist, like picturesque shit where like you're not sure if that's a shape of a person or if it's just a wall. Really crazy stuff. It reminds me of like 90s comics or like Mad Magazine. And yeah, that's but yeah, I'm excited for that. It looks like it's going to be really cool. And we'll see how it goes. It's 6-issue miniseries, so let's try it. Why not?
Sounds good. I didn't know anything about this, but you've piqued my interest, Michael, once again.
I mean, it's coming out from DC, so like I figured there's got to be like, I don't know, something a little bit more special than just like some random podcasters are making a thing. It's like this feels a little bit bigger. And supposedly Soul Plumber is like a character that they plucked out of like DC history past. So like this isn't like an original creation. I think they're just adding their own spin to it.
Gotcha. Huh.
Yeah, well, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about the future of IRCB after episode 300. We're making some changes to Patreon, changes to just the show in general. Nothing that should ruffle too many feathers. But I figured let's talk about it a little bit. And then we also have a really cool interview thing that we did with everybody on the show, just about comics and their thoughts of asking the question, why are comics good? And I really enjoyed recording it with everyone. I can't wait to listen to it because I haven't listened to it yet. It's going to be great. But anyways, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back in a second. What is it about comic books in general that make them so compelling to you?
I think the thing that makes comics so compelling is just the breadth of subject matter that they can cover. Because we tend to throw around the word comics, like we do with books or movies, as if it means like one specific thing. And it does refer to a specific medium, but there are so many different things that different people can do with it. And so I think it's so awesome that whoever you are and whatever you like, there's a comic book out there that you're going to pick up and be like, this was tailor-made for me.
Comics have been compelling for me because they do create these little worlds in this space between straight prose and straight audiovisual media, where you are like able to, like, I have always felt that I've been able to like fall into them easier and into this visual style, and getting to appreciate different kinds of art in a different format than maybe, like, we're surrounded by art all the time, whether it's a piece of graphic design on an advertisement or the pattern on a piece of clothing that we have, or art that we visit in a gallery. And getting to see art used for narrative purposes is something that we're not as used to in a static medium. And for me, it's really interesting to see how artists are able to tell stories that are full of motion when nobody's actually moving. So it's this sort of like weird alchemy that I find very arresting, and it's interesting to see the different art styles and the different storytelling types and see, okay, well, like what works and what doesn't. And everyone who reads comics has such wildly different opinions about what they like in terms of writing, in terms of the art. And because comics are a very collaborative medium, you can see again that middle point between like the one person writing a novel and the hundreds of people who work on a film. You've got maybe like 10 people working on a comic book, so you get a more focused collaboration. So if you like multiple voices feeding into a story, that's a nice middle ground between the two.
What makes comic books special? That's a rough question, but comic books to me were probably the first medium that I really experienced that really emphasized, or at least really made me understand the phrase, the sky is the limit, or even that there is no limit. And it just seemed like there was no end to all the differences and all the craziness that somebody could imagine. And, they're reading them now, even as regularly as I do, there still isn't an end to the different things that we can find. And the only thing holding a comic book creator back is their imagination. And I think that there's something incredibly special in that.
That, for me is such a no-brainer. Comic books are so special to me because of the social aspect to them. As you know, Mike, my friends after college were made by getting involved with this podcast. So I met you through, I was the comic book club president at the time and asked you to come speak to club. And then through that got involved with the podcast and met my best friends in the world. And it's just that comic book club is how I made my friends in college. So it's been this really big social anchor for me in terms of meeting people with similar interests and then having a shared thing to do together. Like pre-pandemic, pre-moving away for grad school, one of my favorite things every single week was going to the local comic book shop together and making a whole thing of it, right? Like you're browsing, as well as picking up your pull list, and also kind of like showing each other what you got and what you'd recommend, and then, you know, going out to eat afterwards and talking about, you know, comic stuff while you're eating. And it's just so much fun. And same with like going to Comic-Con together. It's just like an absolute blast. And then obviously the podcast. A lot of my friends right now, the most I talk to them is through and about podcast stuff, or like Telegram chats related to the podcast and comics and stuff. So it's like the stories that are really special to me too, obviously, but they could be the same stories in novel form or movie form. The thing that is really different about comics that's special for me is that social aspect of like that drawing together of people, and just love you guys.
I mean, sorry, you said that. That
Mike's
really means
blushing.
a lot.
You guys can't see it right now, and I more am seeing it with my spidey sense, but he is blushing.
I think what really makes comics compelling for me, or at least one of the things, is just that it's something that you're really able to tackle at your own pace. I think that that's a big part of it. If you read super fast, if you want to just cut through a book, if you want to sit, you know, and examine panel by panel and just dissect all of the elements of a scene or the page layout or something like that, it's you know, it's so much easier to do that with comics than I think some of the other mediums out there, where you can just really just stop and break things down and take it at your own pace, or alternatively just go as absolutely mind-bogglingly fast as you want to go. I've always really liked that you can sort of tackle comics on your own terms in terms of speed and just digestion of the content, and also just I think people always tap into the serialized nature of comics, but I think also what I've always found compelling sometimes are just the ability for certain things to just end in terms of comics, and I suppose that's true of most mediums, but it's always interesting to see non-serialized stuff as well. So
I think I've always really liked magical realism, where there is like one element of a story that is kind of fantastical. I think Big Fish, the movie, is a really good example of something that more people know about. And it's just a little bit of fantasy in the world, I think, both in the story and then also for me to read it. It's just something that's a little bit more beautiful.
What makes a comics compelling? For me, there is such a more immediate connection between the creator and the reader when it comes to comics. Particularly when we were talking about Love and Rockets and creator-owned series like that, where really just one person, more or less, sitting at the drafting table or sitting at their computer more often these days, drawing, writing, creating something that, you know, isn't going to be the most popular thing in the world, probably isn't the most lucrative way to use their skills, but they're doing it out of pure love. And you can see that on the page. When something's really near and dear to a creator, I think it's more obvious in a comic than some other mediums, you know, as a reader. And I feel that direct connection, just the idea of that being ink on a page or pixels on a tablet that came from someone, and I'm reading it, and I'm probably having the same emotions reading it that they had writing it. I don't think you really get that from a lot of other mediums. I mean, maybe music sometimes, but even then, it's sort of filtered through a lot of different things. I think comics are a lot more immediate and present in the actual, you know, reading of them. So that's what means a lot to me. And it's a small community. I think that walls between consumers and creators it's a lot thinner walls when it comes to comics and some of the mediums too. So I feel there's a lot more direct connection that way, and that's what's always been really special to me. Even mainstream comics, you know, there's a lot more hands involved, a lot more cooks in the kitchen, so to speak. You can tell when a comic is made with passion and one that's not right away. And I think that's really interesting about that medium particularly.
When you're thinking about comic books and you're thinking about something that has really kind of gotten you jazzed about comic books in general, what is one special comic that has a place in your heart?
Well, in a shocking plot twist, absolutely no one saw coming. Sailor Moon is one of the most formative comic book series for me, and Sailor Moon was a series that I started reading in middle school when everything becomes very formative, and the characters were around my age, and it was a way to sort of project these fantastic things happening to these characters as things that I could like put myself into those stories and say, oh man, like wouldn't it be really cool if I and my friends could save planet Earth from the forces of evil through the power of friendship and these like magical wands that come from the moon on high and allow us to protect ourselves and each other. And all of these characters can be girls in different ways and express their femininity in different ways. And like the tough girl, she really just wants to be in a committed relationship with someone and have a flower shop, and the priestess girl just wants to keep like running the shrine because she had a bad relationship experience and thinks men are overrated, and the really smart one just wants to be a doctor like her mom and help people, and one of them just wants to be a teen idol, and they're all just unified by this common mission of making the world a better place and keeping their friendship strong with the like doofy clumsy girl who brought them all together in the first place. So it's just like a really like I've always found it to be a really lovely story about how female friendships can be empowering. And there's a lot of weird like vaguely sexual stuff going on that I don't think was age inappropriate, but looking back I'm kind of like, oh, you were crushing on that dude who was straight up an adult and you were a 14-year-old, like ugh. So it's not a perfect series by any means, but I found it to be very important to me at a time in my life when I like really needed that expression of things could be beautiful and full of light at a time when a lot of the emotions and like hormones you're feeling as a teenager are kind of like bleak and dark. So this was a nice balance to that where I could still express my view of the world as being this fantastical, beautiful place even when bad things are happening around you. And so for me that remains a resonant series.
The comic that has a special place in my heart, and I don't think this will come as a surprise to anybody, is Giant Days. It is sort of the rare comic that just makes me happy. There was never any like anticipation about it. I was never like waiting with bated breath for the next issue of Giant Days to come out. But whenever it did release, it was always the first book I read. And it always just put a smile on my face. It made me laugh out loud alone in my car on my lunch break most of the time. I enjoyed the low stakes, low expectations of it.
Tilly Walton's memoir Spinning is the comic that I'd say has like the most special place in my heart right now, which I realize isn't exactly like a hidden gem. She won the Will Eisner Comic Industry Award for Best Reality-Based Work for this book in 2018. But beyond being just like absolutely phenomenal, gorgeous artwork, I think it is so special to me because I had such a similar childhood to her. I was the same kind of type A, really competitive and perfectionistic kid, and also extremely anxious with very similar parents that weren't necessarily the most supportive. Also had similar experiences that she goes through in the book of being kind of that quiet, nerdy kid that has issues with getting bullied at school and growing up gay in an area and time where it's not accepted, and it brings about a lot of like fear and shame. And so I think this one, when I read it for the first time, is one of those books that I instantly reread because it just blew me away and hit me. It was just, that punch to the chest. But it's so good and so ultimately hopeful, and was one of those things we talk about sometimes on the show about like when you feel really seen in comics, and comics have a way sometimes of making you feel less alone and less strange and weird and stuff like that. And so I just love the story, love that book. It will be on my shelf forever.
I don't want to play too close to being on brand for this because it's an obvious choice, but it's the first one that comes to mind. It's obviously going to be Love and Rockets. Not a comic that I read when I was young. I came to it pretty late in the game, so to speak. It was right when I was getting back into reading comics regularly, probably about 10, 12 years ago now. So I must have been in my 20s. I was in college. I was tuned out of mainstream comic books, just dabbling back into it again for the first time in probably a decade. Right when they were launching the third volume of Love and Rockets, when they kind of switched it to being an annual 100-page collection. And I grabbed the first one because I knew the name, I knew it was a legendary comic book series, and it grabbed me immediately. And going back and rereading that whole series that's been going on for 36 years now and still going, having the experience of reading that book, getting caught up with it, having new issues coming out, it's really been almost a constant presence in my comic book reading since I got back into comics. And I've had so many emotional moments reading that series. It's a series I've connected with other people with. I think I've convinced you to read it at times. So it's a comic that means a lot to me personally, and it's one of the few comic books that has had absolute stunning pages that I've had to stop, catch my breath, hold back tears. It's such an emotional experience with that comic. So it's got to be my choice for that. It really has a special place for me. And pretty much everyone I know that's read it has had a pretty similar experience. That's my choice. Love and Rockets by Jaime and Gilbert Hernandez, and sometimes Mario Hernandez.
I Kill Giants is really special to me. I've read this a couple of times now, and it sticks with me for days every time I read it. The first time I read it, it really challenged what comics could be for me, what they could talk about. The protagonist in this story isn't really likable, but you can see why. She's basically being raised by her teenage sister while her mom is on life support upstairs, which is something that she's not dealing with internally. And the comic ends without telling you if giants of the title I Kill Giants are actually real in the world, because the protagonist can see them, but nobody else can. And the comic is kind of open-ended in that way. And the implied world from that way that it leaves off is just so much bigger than the world on the surface of the story. This kind of family drama that's happening, and this girl trying to figure out how she's going to handle it. And that is commentary, I think, about our own flawed world. It kind of helps me remember that even though things can look really bad, there's still a largeness to our world that is buried in there somewhere.
I think two of the books that I really cherish for me, and obviously we're going to cheat here and pick two. One is Aliens Dead Orbit. I realized that was recently, on the show. And the other is sort of Transformers versus G.I. Joe. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but I think we all have certain comic book turning points or growth in our reading of comics. And I'm not saying that everybody needs to reach a point where they've, read everything and their third eye has been opened to all comicdom, right? But for me, those two books sort of opened the door of kind of shattering that idea that franchise books can't be good. And I think that was like a chip on my shoulder that I had, I think, for a while there. I always appreciate those two books, especially because they sort of said, hey, there are other people that really care about these things too, and are willing to sort of put out some stories that expand or expound upon a universe. And I think comics have had that capacity to build a franchise in ways that we just don't see other media really doing anymore.
Oof, it's so hard to pick just one, but what comic has a special place in my heart and why? Well, I'm gonna have to break all my fellow manga nerds' hearts and go with a comic, and it's not even an old comic, but it's a Superior Spider-Man number 31, and it's because it's the last issue in Superior Spider-Man. Peter Parker has just regained control of his body from Dr. Octavius. He is back, baby. There's chaos everywhere, and he's trying to, pick up the pieces of everything that Otto destroyed as Spider-Man, while also still just kind of getting his balance. But if anything, it really just kind of comes down to one line where, the Green Goblin's making fun of Octavius because he thinks that that's who it is, and then Spider-Man, Peter Parker, makes fun of him, gives him a nice solid quip, and they just do this panel where they just do a close-up on Green Goblin's eyes, and he's just furious, and he goes, "It's you." And Spidey just responds, "The one and only." And that encapsulates everything that Spider-Man is and is to me. And, you know, it's just, I love that moment. When I first read it, both arms went up in the air. I gave a big old belly laugh, and it's just one that I think about constantly.
I guess to wrap things up here, I say it every week on the show, or at least I have been for the last however many episodes since we figured out how to end the show. I say, you know, comics are good. And I don't know if that means a lot to you, but it means a lot to me, because when I think about comics in general, I usually think about all of the joy that they've brought me and the way that they've united like this group of people, plus everybody that I've met over the last 6 years or more. You know, reading comics has been like a really central focused thing. And I think coming up with that stinger for the end of every episode saying that comics are good really holds true. And it's been absolutely the truth. So I'm curious, you know, when you either hear me say it or you think about that phrase or you see it on a t-shirt or something, you know, comics are good. Why do you think comics are good?
I think the biggest thing that I love about comics that makes comics good in my eyes is the ability to just do some real wild shit in a comic book. You know, you don't have to worry about if I write a prose novel, for instance, I always have to wonder, like, what is going through the audience's head when they're reading this? What are they picturing? In a comic, you don't have to worry about that because they can see exactly what you and the artist, or if you're the writer, what you want them to see. Whereas in film and TV, you can also show the audience exactly what you want them to see, but it comes at a much higher price tag. I'm of the opinion that comic book artists are not being paid nearly enough, but even if they were, it would still cost a hell of a lot less than the special effects budget on a big name movie or TV show. So you can kind of just go nuts. You know, if you want to do something wild and crazy, you just write it down and you and the artist figure it out.
I think that comics are good because in the age of the internet, we've all gotten used to having media that is quick to access and quick to consume. And comics really gives that to us. I can read one volume in 90 minutes or maybe one issue in 15 minutes around there. But when I'm into a story, I'm in it. A good story will really have me in its grasp. I won't notice the rest of the world, for better or for worse. Comics can present us with an escapism that engages both our visual and language centers, so I feel more grasped by a story than I do when I'm reading a prose book or watching TV or even reading audiobooks. And that makes the stories seem more real in the moment. And really getting into a story puts me in a mental place where I'm not just reading about whether, say, the Ninja Turtles are looking for Splinter. I'm reading about a found family trying to stick together in a world that won't accept them. And the comics that I'm drawn to often make commentary about very real things like this, but it makes those things meaningful and more beautiful than they seem in real life.
When I reflect upon that, I do really think comics are great in terms of their ability to bring people together, for sure, whether that's over a Discord that we've done, or whether it's in person, you know, like we were doing for a while, or whether that's, you know, getting together at your local comic shop, or maybe on Reddit, except maybe not on Reddit. That one's up for debate. But I do think that comics do have this real unifying principle to them, and I do think that beyond that, when I think of what it's done in terms of our show and bringing everybody together there and having you know, a singular shared interest, but then building that out, and I think that's probably got to be the case for so many other people, where maybe comics are the starting shared interest, or maybe they're some point that you arrive at. But I do think it sort of does work in that way. I would say, I think one of the other things that I think is so, you know, good about comics, and I guess in terms of being like a light for good, or a you know, some sort of shining, you know, Statue of Liberty-esque uplifting beacon. That's the word, beacon. I can't think of beacon. A real beacon for good is just that comics have this ability, and it's not unique to comics, but comics are one of the very few things that have this ability where they're so able to literally respond to things, right? I think in terms of, social causes, in terms of topical events or human rights or things like that, comics are unique in that their creation process sometimes is just so fast, right, that they're able to just like that was me snapping my fingers. I'm sure Xander loved that too. They're just able to instantly respond to things going on, as opposed to a TV show or a movie where, maybe they feel some way about something, but you get to hear about it 2 or 3 years later, 4 or 5 years later. And I think comic books are one of those unique mediums that has that ability to just turn around on a dime and reflect on something. And that's a unique perspective that we've certainly seen more than enough creators not hesitate to take advantage of in that way. And I think that's powerful, and it's unique.
I think comics are good for me because of the community that they evolves around them, both in terms of my personal social groups, but also just the community we have with the podcast listeners and Discord and Goodreads groups and people I've met through there, and on the wider world if you go on Twitter and stuff. I just love that bringing together of people around the stories and the art. I love going to Comic-Cons and getting my favorite art prints signed and framed and putting them on a wall, so then I'm talking about them when people come over, and that collecting aspect of everything is just so much fun and is so much more interactive than hanging out watching a movie on Netflix. I also love movies. I am a story lover in all mediums, and consume them in all mediums, but I think that's the really good part about comics to me.
Her little catchphrase, comics are good and so are you. I really do think that we still come up upon this concept of in the wider cultural narrative that comics are either for kids or for weirdos and weirdos with a negative connotation. So when I'm saying comics are good, I mean this expression of art and narrative building in this particular style has great potential, and there is a story for you. And I know that comics are not a medium that everyone is interested in. Not everybody is interested in viewing a narrative that they have to read as opposed to view. But I do think that for people who are interested in these visual arts and the marriage of visual and prose-based storytelling, there is this whole other way to experience stories, and it is a medium that can do some really amazing things visually. There's the whole, you're only limited in a comic by your imagination with what you can draw, and again, different from a written novel where you're kind of filling in a lot of the gaps of what the creator is intending, and with a comic that can kind of hold your hand a little bit more and get at what you're looking at. All the every few years somebody says, well, when are they going to make Saga into a TV show? And I'm like, have you looked at Fiona Staples' art? Do you know how much money that CGI would cost?
Something that gets me that spark, I think it kind of rounds about to, why any and all comics are exciting, or in our sense for IRCB, why comics are good, is that I think that they inspire, not just ideas or beliefs, but they inspire our imagination and our emotions. I think they encourage us to really think about what's possible. They can be fun, they can be cool, they can be dark, or they can be a million other things. But when you flip through the pages, something happens. And I would consider that, being that's inspiration, no matter what level it is. they inspire something in us on every page, and I think that ultimately is what makes comics good.
Why do I think comics are good? Well, they're one of the few sort of art forms I still keep up with regularly. You know, I've been reading comics for over 30 years now, if I really think about it. And there's still an excitement I get when I go to the comic book shop. And even if it's something as reading Batman, which again, I've been reading Batman comics for 30 years, and you'd think I'd get tired of them. But there's really something special about the memories I have of reading comics as a kid. I still get that excitement when I go to the comic book shop. And there is, again, something very special about the community that comics creates between the creator and the reader. And I think being on a show like this, where it's just people being excited about comic books, it reminds me of that sense that this is a special art form, and it's gotten way more, I think, accessible and accepted on a mainstream level than it ever has been in my lifetime. And it gets me excited about the future of comics. So I think what makes comics good is that they're always growing and evolving. You know, there's always going to be something different we can try with comics, something different you're going to see, new creators, new voices coming up. And it just gets me excited about the future. And comic book burnout is a real thing, as I've said. But when you read a good comic, or if I go to the comic book shop and I grab my books, I do get excited still. And I think that's a sign of an exciting and a good art form. So what makes comics good is that they are good. You know what I mean? They're fun to read and they're good. So that may be too simple of an answer, but that's how I'm going to say it.
Yeah. No, you know what? Perfect. That's exactly the kind of answer I'm looking for. Because it's episode 300, I have to ask this question. This is my legally mandated question for this interview series, which is, what are your thoughts on the movie or comic known as 300?
I'm sorry, what, Michael?
I mean, you know, the movie 300, you know.
Oh my God, how did I know you were going to do this?
I don't know. I don't have any. It was a massive meme in my early college days.
What are your thoughts on the movie or comic known as 300?
Well, I've never read the comic. I have to confess, that is a blank spot in my Frank Miller knowledge. I remember sitting in the theater watching the movie 300 and could not wait for it to end. I could not stand that movie. So it really felt like I was watching someone play a video game. So there you go.
Oh boy, I've seen the movie and I've read the comic of 300.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's totally fine.
Huh.
I don't hate it. Do I think it's accurate to history? No, and that's probably the biggest gripe I have with it. Well, I know that people have gripes with it based on art and storytelling and whatnot. And honestly, my biggest gripe with it is historical inaccuracy. So take that as you will. But those are my final thoughts on it.
Perfect. I have to throw that in. It's episode 300. So
I didn't even get that. You bastard.
The movie 300. I have not seen the movie 300. I know that it involves a lot of oiled, shaved, beefy men.
Yes.
And Lena Headey. Which is the only reason I think I know anything at all about it, as I saw it on a list of movies with her in it, and then it went to like the bottom of the list in terms of what I'm actually going to watch.
Thoughts on the movie or comic known as 300? Is that what you said?
Yeah, Frank Miller's epic masterpiece.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's definitely Frank Miller's. I don't know about the other two words you used. He's owned it, that's for sure.
This week on I Read Comic Books, we don't really have a focus for the episode because it's episode 300. I'm here with my two oldest compatriots on the show, my ride or dies, you would say, Nick and Paul. You guys have been with the show pretty much since the beginning, with the exception of Xander, who's in the chat today. I guess, episode 300, I think I've alluded to the fact that like the show's going to end after 300. I don't know what's going to happen, but episode 300, it's kind of a big deal. And I don't know. I wanted to get your guys' thoughts about it. I do want to say just a real quick for anyone at home who's like actually calculating stats and stuff. We have like 414 plus episodes actually in our history of the show. If you include This Is Not an Interview and minisodes, I think we're up to minisode 50. The first 6 episodes of Saga of Saga, which is on Patreon, our bonus interviews, Candy Bar Antler Boy, so many other things in the main feed. But as far as official episodes are concerned, yeah, this is episode 300. And yeah, I don't know. We've got a bunch of new stuff coming down the line, but I don't know. Nick, Paul, how are you guys feeling about 300 episodes?
Basically, you're saying that this is like when the year 2000 was right on the horizon, and all of those nerds showed up, and they're like, "Well, actually, it's not really the year 2000, but I guess we'll just let you have it." Like, I think that's.
There was the intentional erasure of 200 episodes in the middle there that I'm just not talking about.
That would be perfect. Just start gaslighting people. They're like, where are episodes 56 to 63? And you're like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, I should say that if you are looking for those old episodes, I think before episode 100 or so, they're just not in the feed anymore because Apple and most podcast companies like don't surface more than 300 episodes in a feed. So I apologize if you're out there trying to find those episodes. Hit me up. I'll send them to you. If you want them, DM me. But yeah, Paul, I don't know. What are your thoughts? Nick got his smarmy talking, so like, go ahead. What do you think?
I mean, I'm excited for the hard reboot. I'm excited for the hard reboot that's going to happen when you recast all of us and pretend nothing happened. Sorry. No,
Paul and I just go up the stairs at the end of the last season, and no one ever sees us.
We went out to buy a pack of smokes and just never came back. So
right.
No, in all seriousness, I fondly remember going to your basement, Mike, the three of us sitting around a little table, recording the show, not sure what the show is going to be or what it should be. And then now here we are 300 episodes later, or give or take, with a bunch of friends in the chat. And I say friends instead of listeners. We have a bunch of people here who love the show and love talking about comics. And I think that's what we realize what the show should be. And that's just people talking about things they love about comic books. And I'm glad that it's become this over time. It's kind of hard to believe. And it wasn't until I started doing this and talking to you all today that I really, the weight of it all kind of hit me. So yeah, there you go.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I mean, it's weird thinking about like, I think the last year and a half, especially since we've been indoors for a long time, really been trying to reflect back on like all the good things in life and trying to, focus on that in terms of, instead of all the other horrible shit that's happening, and thinking about this show being like a consistent good thing that stresses me out and makes me frustrated and tired, and I have to spend so much fucking time on it, and I get so mad at myself like thinking I'm wasting my time. And it's like, that's not it at all. Like, I'm not wasting my time. Like, every week I feel super accomplished. I do something every single week with you guys, and it's spectacular, and I'm proud of it. And every single time we put out episodes, I walk away from them and I'm always happy. Like, I can't think of an episode where I was genuinely upset. And even listening to episodes that I'm not on, I'm just like, God damn, we've got a fucking amazing group of people here. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, 6 years, that's a long time to be doing anything,
And yeah, I mean, it's a testament to your commitment and Xander's commitment that the show comes out every week. All I have to do is read comics and talk about it every once in a while. All the work that you guys do behind the scenes is very, very impressive and should not go unmentioned or unrecognized. So
yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. We did like a reflection of this kind of stuff, I think, back in the annual earlier this year. So I don't necessarily want to sit here and be like, look at all that we've done. But at the same time, it's interesting because I think the show has evolved and changed in ways that are for the better, for the worse, and we've really honed in.
Wow. Okay.
Well, no,
wow.
I say we've tried things and it didn't work. Yeah. I mean, do you guys remember when we covered news? Do you guys remember when we had to scour Reddit for things and we were like, what the fuck is this? Those episodes are hidden
behind dredge up any sort of artificial controversy we could.
Well, that's what I'm saying. And like, we pulled up stuff, and I'm glad those episodes are buried. You can't find them like right now. They're behind. If you DM me for an episode that's got news in it, it's questionable whether or not you're going to get it. But still, like, we've done some stuff that like did work and didn't work, and like it's fine. And ultimately, we've found what works best for the show, and that's like one of the things Xander and I've spent a lot of time talking about over the last like 6, 7, 8 weeks as I've been staring down the barrel of episode 300. Looks like a shotgun, guys. Put the imagery together. It's 2 zeros, right? I've been thinking about, what are we going to do after 300? Is the show going to change? Are we going to just keep doing the same thing? And does that work? Is that exciting for everybody? Does anybody want to sit down and just talk about comics every week? Is that interesting to everybody on the show? And like, by and large, I think the episode, or the answer is yeah. You know, we do want to talk about comics. We do want to do kind of the same thing, but with a little bit of, I guess, more flexibility. I think what's really funny about the show, and this is me, you guys, I appreciate this therapy session today, but the thing that I've been thinking a lot about is like, you know, the rigidity of the show is what kept it going for so long, right? Of just like, this is what we do. We record it this time on this day. You know, we used to record at 3, now we record at 1, and, you know, the show's going to be this, it's going to be broken up like this. You know, I think that got us all into these habits that worked really well to make sure that we showed up with something to say and what we knew what to talk about. And I think with rare exception, it worked, and it has been working. I think that's what's brought everybody to continue to listen to the show. And now, like, moving past episode 300, a lot of what I'm thinking of is I want to be a little bit looser with things. Like, obviously, the first half of the show today went really long. I don't see anything wrong with that. I'm glad that we got to have the conversation that we did. And, you know, some episodes, I think, moving forward are going to have focused topics. Some of them aren't. And in that case, they're going to be a little bit shorter, and maybe they're going to have, or we talk for maybe 20 minutes or 10 minutes, and that's like the end of the show. I just want to make sure that everybody shows up. We don't try to drag the show out to try to meet some deadline. We don't try to, force us to try to make conversation when there isn't any.
Shoehorn things.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so, you know, one of the big things is, you know, we're kind of changing topic formats and how we're focusing on the second, quote unquote, second half of our show. And, just to be more geared towards what people want to talk about, you know, like things that are, here's a topic someone was really excited about. Let's make that into an episode, keep that energy, and so on and so forth. So I don't know. I'm kind of rambling here, but like we're doing a lot, and I'm really excited about it. That's what I'm trying to say.
And I think anybody who's listened to the show for any amount of time has probably noticed that we have, you know, made efforts to really reformat and change the show over the years. And I don't think that there's, you know, anything wrong with that. If people like the current format that we're at, like we didn't get there overnight. Like there were definitely changes and modifications to arrive at this point. And I think the fact that we're just continuing to evolve and grow, I think that's a real credit to, you know, Mike and Xander, because I know
that's a credit to all of us, though. Like I really like,
right?
You guys
but I
put
know,
a lot
like,
of...
you know, peek behind the curtain. Like I know that, you know, little peek behind the curtain. I know you and Xander have these discussions like all the time. You're always sort of thinking about like, how can we change? How can we grow? What's working? What's not working? And I think that's a real, you know, and it's a testament to everyone else for being so receptive and willing to go along with it, and you know, make a real effort to bring those changes to bear, because there are plenty of shows, we're not going to name them, and obviously not just comic book oriented, but just podcasts in general, where at a certain point, you know, things just go on autopilot, or they're too scared to change things because they know that there is a baked in audience for whatever the current format is, even if there's no growth there. And so, and I think full credit to everyone. I think people make it look easy. I think people make it look really easy for the things to change and grow and evolve. And well, I mean, it's hard work.
Yeah. I mean, I the thing that I've been thinking a lot about is like, you know, for a long time when we were working on the show, like our biggest thing is like, well, how to get more people to listen. And like the question that I keep coming back to, I think Xander just kind of point blank asked me this. Like we've been doing like regular just chats about this kind of stuff. He's like, well, what's the goal, right? Like, what are we trying to do? And I mean, I kind of blanked, and I was like, well, we want more people to listen to the show. And it's like, but why? And I couldn't really come up with a solid answer. And I'm like, well, we have a lot of listeners. We have a lot of really fantastic human beings that listen to this show. And we interact with them a lot on Discord or on Twitter or whatever, right? We get emails, people pass the name of our show along. It's fantastic. And so like a lot of the things that I'm focusing on post 300 and talking with you guys and trying to plan out our episodes is just like, I want to do whatever we can to enrich the listeners' lives here, right? Everybody that's listening to the show that wants to hang out with us and be a part of our little community, like, let's just do stuff for everybody that's here. And if you want to come join the club, we're welcoming everybody with open arms. Our big thing isn't necessarily like we need to make the most generic episode ever to bring in the most new listeners. It's like, nah. Let's just do stuff that like we really want to do, and we're confident so far with the people that have stuck around that they're gonna like it too. And maybe this is me being blanket, but like I'm also thinking about like anybody. I want anybody who listens to this show to send us ideas. What do you want us to talk about? And we're changing our Patreon to kind of be a little bit more oriented towards that, but and I'll talk about that later, but but I do want to like I want more engagement if that's what it I want to engage with the people that are listening to our show, and so like that's what I'm aiming. And this feels like I don't know, now I feel really weird about talking about all this directly, but I'm trying to be like as transparent about like what we're doing moving forward, because we've been doing a lot of stuff on the main feed to try to loosen things up. You may have noticed that over the last couple of weeks. I don't know if anybody listened to last week's episode, but it was a riot. If you want more Kermit impressions, support us on Patreon. I'll help you out with that.
The new Patreon, the new highest Patreon tier is just literally handing out Paul's phone number.
No.
Yes.
Well, that James Bond money comes rolling in, guys. I might have to make myself scarce. So.
Yeah, I can't wait. We'll make a fun little James Bond T-shirt. Paul. James Bond, Paul
Please
Bond.
don't.
Someone said that in
don't
the.
do that.
I know. I'm just kidding. Yeah,
Mike, what I like about this whole, the choice we're making to kind of shake things up, I think it feels like you keep saying that it's like we're changing things, but really I think we're just underlining the stuff that already works in the show. Like, I think very early on, we realized what we like to do was just talk about comics without, like to have a theme or something, but the most fun of the episodes was talking about comics. And then once we started doing the Discord, interacting with listeners and friends there, it was like, that's what people like. So if we can kind of make the show focused on just celebrating what we love about comics and talking about them in an open-ended way, that's what people want to hear. And I think that's what gets people excited to do it. When it doesn't feel like a chore to come talk about stuff on the show. I wanted to make sure I read something interesting to talk about on the show for today's episode. And those books that I read, I was like, when I was reading, I was like, oh yeah, I can't wait to mention this. Or I want to tell Mike and Nick about this particular thing because I think is interesting. So it's actually changed the way I read comics. And I think maybe that's the what we kind of want to make happen for listeners in the future too, is like get people excited to talk about comics and get people excited to read comics, because that's what we're here to do. That's what the show's named, what it is named, so that's what we're doing. So.
Yeah, you definitely you've summed up everything that I've been rambling about perfectly. I think like like the
again, that's why I'm here.
Yeah, I mean the lean in that we're trying to make here is like, again, just doubling down on what we really like about the show. And so like when I say we're making big changes, like the changes are just like us in trying to enjoy the show more, and try to make it as easy as possible to show up to talk about stuff that they love. And, people, we all have our own interests and we all have very differing interests. And that's why we have the cast that we have. And like, whether we expand it or whatever in the future, like, I want to make sure that we're, everyone at the table has like, is excited about something. And that when they come to the show, it's not a chore to like talk about a specific topic, or talk about whatever we're going to talk about. Because I know that like my at the end of the day, I think I said this before we started recording. I've been saying this to Xander. Like, I know every single person on this show can talk about comics eloquently and in a way that I find extremely interesting. And that's why you're on the show. That's why everyone's on the show. And I love that about everybody here. And I love that about the people we get to come on the show as guests and stuff. Like, just like the end of the day, why did I start the show in the first place? I just want to talk to people about comic books, but I hate talking to people about comic books. And we figured out a way for me to get over my anxiety in order to make that happen. And, here we are 6 years later and we're doing it and I fucking love it. And I look forward to it every single week. So we're just trying, like, again, just doubling down on that thing that makes this show amazing. And
I was thinking about, reflecting on 300 episodes. I know these are things, again, you mentioned we talked about in our annual earlier this year, but things we've accomplished on the show. I think being able to do interviews with creators is a very important part of the show and something I hope we do more of, and I think we will do more of. But what I like is when we've had those people on the show, it's never just tell us about what you're working on. It's what have you been reading? What is your favorite comic? And you can almost hear people's excitement in their voice, like, oh, I can actually talk about the stuff I like. And to have creators talk like fans is like my favorite thing to listen to.
Absolutely.
Because suddenly it makes you realize how small of a community comic book readers are, unfortunately. But it's the idea of like the people that make comics are fans to begin with. So we have this shared language to talk about. And I love that aspect of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So Yeah, I don't know. Big changes, no change. I don't know. However you guys see it, the next handful of episodes are going to be us like really digging in on this. And I think the last couple of episodes I've been trying to try new things. So I'm really excited to see what we do. And some of the episodes that we have planned are really wild and out there. And I hope that you all dig what we have coming in the near future. Speaking of things in the near future, one of the things that I will say, we are changing the music for the show. I know episode 300, this episode is going to have our regular music, but music after this episode is going to be new songs, still by Infinity Shred, the best band in the universe. We couldn't give them up. But this is it's going to be really cool. Xander and I have been working on finding new music, and it's going to be real nice.
Awesome.
Xander's threatening to cut some things out of this episode already that I'm talking about, so I don't know what's going to happen. But let's one other thing I do want to talk about here. This is mostly just like some housekeeping stuff, but the threat, everyone thinks that we're doing like IRCB season 2 or all new, all different IRCB. I mean, the joke was out there. When I finish this, let me go over this whole stuff with Patreon and I'll tell you guys about all the crazy shit that Xander and I were talking about.
Okay.
So beyond 300, we're changing up the way that we're doing some of our Patreon stuff. Like folks that are already Patreon subscribers got this update and the schedule update. If you back us at $5 or more per month, you get schedule updates about what we're doing in the near future, as well as all the Patreon only series that we've done. Like Book versus Book, IRCB Movie Club, Saga of Saga, which is 63 episodes long, by the way. I do not want to shy away from the fact that we did Saga of Saga, which is an issue by issue breakdown of every single issue of Saga. Just want to throw that out there. Giant Days of Our Lives, which is Brian, Kate, and Kara going over every volume of Giant Days. Paul and I read Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol. The Movie Club, we're about to hit episode 8, which is going to be really, really exciting. We're doing an Alan Moore themed month. We picked 3 Alan Moore comic book based movies. That's what we're going to be talking about. You got to go vote. But at $5 or more a month, you can get access to all that. You can vote. You can check schedule updates. And yeah, so moving forward, so we had this $10 tier, and the $10 tier was kind of ephemeral, and it wasn't, you get access to show notes and you got access to like voting on new things, and it wasn't really well utilized. And so we're changing things up on the Patreon to essentially we're limiting the number of $10 tiers that you can have, or that we have. And for $10 a month, as long as you say a $10 per month person, we will basically allow you to commission an episode of the show. We're going to do one a month, probably starting next year. And basically the idea is if we're hoping to get annual subscriptions, but 12 slots, $10 a month. And if you're at that slot, you get to commission who's going to be on the episode and what the episode's going to be about. So we're encouraging everyone to go do that. Otherwise, all the other benefits that the $10 tier had are going to move down to the $5 tier. So you get access to the raw show notes for every episode. For the most part, sometimes we don't have them, and so on and so forth. But and as well as you get to vote on future Patreon series, and then plus all access to the series that are going to be only on Patreon, schedule updates, and early access to Top of My Pile, and early access to episodes. Like everyone from the $2 tier up gets early access to episodes, and they come out on Monday, and then the regular episode comes out on Wednesday. We do special series like Candy Bar, Antler Boy. Usually those go up a couple days early as well. So let's see. The other thing that we're changing things is basically, yeah, I think we're adding a new Discord role. I mentioned it at the top of the show. For folks that back at that $10 tier, you get access to what's called the IRCB Inner Circle. You get a special role where you can basically come chat with us about those special episodes and just be a part of this very limited group of people. So just kind of changing things up to add a little bit more variety to things. And the only last thing that I'll say is $5 a month to me is a steal for everything that we offer. Like, I don't want to toot my own horn, but holy shit, there's so much stuff to listen to that we've produced in the last 2 years. It is mind-boggling. And 2, we don't know what our next Patreon series is going to be. I've been throwing out a bunch of ideas. Nick and Paul, I want to hear what your thoughts are, if only because one of them is one that I've been goofing around with in the back of my head of like... I don't know anything about death metal from DC, and I just want to go in blind. And I just need someone to go with me on that ride. Or are Nick and I are just going to read a short series of manga and just go through it at fucking breakneck speed, like 20-minute episodes max. And I'm talking me and Nick at 20 minutes max. You hear that?
Yeah, not going to happen, but okay.
Chainsaw Man or Again or BL Metamorphosis. We'll let the Patreon folks pick, or just something else. Honestly, we're looking for ideas. If you have any, send it your way. Send it to us, I guess. And the one other thing that I've been thinking about is, what if we ran a small campaign of Kieran Gillen's Die RPG, and we recorded it and released it like in hour-long increments or something, and we just play it until it's done, because his RPG is about to be finished, and I'm right in that headspace of listening to Die, and I kind of want to play a game around that. But anyways, Paul, Nick, what are your thoughts? What are you guys thinking? I've been talking for 10 minutes.
Sure.
Look,
go ahead, Paul. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I've spent 6 years trying to get anyone else on the show to read Love and Rockets. So I guess I'm going to need one of these Patreon supporters to finally force it to happen.
Listen, I read Love Bunglers a while ago. I just don't think we had
know.
a chance to talk about it. Maybe we should just do a special minisode about that, because I think that's, it's there.
I read the one that was on the reading challenge this year. So we're
there you go. See,
we're good, Paul.
I'm forcing my slowly but surely all going to finish it. No, I think what's great is that there's such what's the word I'm looking for? An embarrassment of riches of stuff to listen to that we've talked about, and we're really just scratching the surface. I mean, there's so many comics out there, obviously, but the strength of the show has been all of the contributors' eclectic and unique styles or tastes in comics. So being able to cross those streams, to talk about someone who's not a big DC fan about DC stuff, to get someone who doesn't read manga to read manga, maybe not me, but maybe Nick. I mean,
I can see that the lines are already being drawn for all of these things. Like, very clearly, we're demarcating where people like, what's a bridge too far?
The crossing those streams, so to speak, would definitely be the most interesting and fun path to go down, and that's when the best conversations happen. So yeah.
So basically what's going to happen is I'm going to get on the Love and Rockets episode, Paul's going to end up on the manga episode, and we're just going to...
No, actually, it's going to be a book versus book, but Paul's going to pick a manga, and Nick, you're going to pick a Love and Rockets volume.
Oh,
there you go.
I mean... I don't know. Again, I just want to do fun stuff, and that seems really bland and maybe too vague. But like, there's, like you said, Paul, there's so many comics out there. There's so many opportunities for us to just have a lot of fun, and I can't wait to do it. I think like we're probably gonna wait through the rest of this year, try to figure out what we're gonna do for the next big Patreon series. Giant Days of Our Lives was the big one this year. Saga of Saga was the 1 year before that. We might try to do something small. Like, I think maybe near the end of the year we might do like a quick one-off thing or something, maybe force Nick and I to get caught up on Ice Cream Man or something, or maybe we'll do a special edition of minisode for Haha, because that ties in, but it's not part of the Ice Cream Man series. We'll see, but nonetheless, Mike, go ahead.
So I just want to say real quick, I really, really enjoyed doing the Doom Patrol series. I don't know how many people actually listened to it, but it was something where I was rereading a book that I had read, I mean, maybe half a dozen times already, but I was rereading it to talk about on the show. I would take extensive notes for each issue. Like, it really made me reread that series a different way. And I think a really a nice deep dive into something like that, even if it's something I'm already familiar with, it was a rewarding experience. So hopefully everyone else, if you haven't listened to it yet, check that out. Again, it's one of my very favorite comic book series. And again, we might need to revisit it now that the third season of the show's coming up. So
I know. Well, this is all the more reason for us to do the fabled, either Gerard Way Doom Patrol read, or that miniseries, the 4-issue miniseries about the guy who I can't think of the name of, who wears the loincloth. Flex Mentallo. I mean, we could, if we want to dig back into it, or TV series review, Paul. Do we do a TV series? Who knows? But yeah, maybe. So that's pretty much everything I had as far as announcements. I don't know. Anything else you guys want to talk about really quick? Because otherwise, we have a very special voicemail from our good friend Danny that we can listen to.
Let's hear it from Danny. Let's do it.
Let's dig in. So our friend Danny, he is from Danny's been a long time listener to the show, and we love him to death. He's also got his own podcast, the Next Issue podcast, and he's very worried in the chat. But I listened to a little bit of this earlier, and it's a very, very nice voicemail. So I
hope the whole thing is just a whole plug for his own show.
Yes, that's fine.
That would make that, I want that more than anything else, honestly. Like,
well, let's listen to this. Hopefully I should be able to play this and everybody should be able to hear it. So let's try this.
Hey everyone at the I Read Comic Books podcast, Danny here. I just want to wish y'all a happy 300th episode. When I started listening back in, I don't know, maybe 2016, 17, I found the podcast to be very different than a lot of stuff I've ever listened to when it comes to comics. I really liked that there were several combinations of hosts, and there were so many people that were just really passionate and interested in talking about all aspects of comics, not just like, what they're reading, what's going on, not just like, superhero stuff, but like all kinds of stuff. And it's been so much fun to watch the podcast evolve and change and bring in people. And as someone that listens to this pretty much every week, and I love listening live, I think that's one of the coolest features, just because you get to really get to see how how everything's made, how the sausage is made. And sometimes that's a little, and it's a lot. There's so much that doesn't get put out in the podcast because it happens in between, like when the hosts are taking a break. Yeah, it's a great community. I've enjoyed the times that I've gotten to go on the podcast. That's definitely been a lot of fun because like doing my own thing, like it's very different from what you guys do, so it's always really cool to step into different shoes. And hopefully one day in the future we'll finally actually get together and hang out and meet, talk about all the comics that we love and all the stuff that we just kind of talk about on a regular basis, but we'll get to do it in person. So yeah, happy 300 episode. This is quite a milestone. I mean, like 300 is such a great milestone. I'm very happy, looking forward to whatever this 300 episode looks like. I'm still looking forward to way more things and just hearing back from everyone. So many cool people through listening to the podcast and talking and hanging out, and just I feel like I've just been introduced to a really great community. So it's really nice to see that there's other people that are as enthused about comics as I am, and maybe even more sometimes. So that's always very cool. But we all kind of have our space and our niche, and like we know what, as we get to know each other, understand what everyone's likes, dislikes, and things maybe we haven't even tried. I've read so many things that I would have never, because of the podcast and recommendations from everyone. So yeah, I hope you guys have a great one, and I think that this is gonna be one for the books. I can't wait to listen live on Sunday. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Yay.
Oh man, thank you, Danny. That is so nice, man.
Yeah.
Thanks, Danny. Yeah, that was.
Thank you so much, Danny.
Listen, I am 100% for people sending us voicemails like that. Honestly, like this warms my heart, and it's so much fun. So Danny, thank you so much, man. It genuinely means so much that you've continued to like listen to our show, and I love doing the Candy Bar Antler Boy series with you. Can't wait to do the next one for season 2. Like, I'm super hyped. And yeah, thank you so much. And everybody, Danny said he didn't plug his show. I'm going to plug his show for him. Next Issue Podcast. It's fantastic. Highly recommend it. Those guys go hard. I'll just say that. They go hard into comics and stuff. So I don't know. Nick, Paul, go ahead. I've been talking over both of you.
I'm really really touched by Danny's words there. That does mean a lot to me. The idea of that. I always wanted the show when we started, once we figured out what we wanted it to be a celebration of comics. And I think by doing that, we would find a community of listeners. And I think we've done that, and it's become a community of friends. And, I think we do stand out. There's a lot of shitty comic book podcasts out there. Luckily, we're a good one. And I think that's because of the listenership and because of our commitment to celebrating comics as an art form and making it as accessible as possible. So thank you, Danny. I'm glad to hear that worked out. So yeah, thank you.
I love that Paul had the opportunity to really give a real like hedge your bets. Well, there's something for everyone sort of comment, and he just went straight for the fucking neck and was just like, yeah, everyone else is trash and it's a wasteland, and we're all glad you're here. So
exactly.
I think Danny really hit the nail on the head. Just it's a diverse group of people. I think we do manage to hit on topics that you're just not seeing in other places, and that means a lot to me, because I think we've had discussions over the years about trying to appeal to the masses, about trying to broaden our horizons and bring in news articles and look like something akin to Bleeding Cool in some capacity. And those conversations were fleeting, but they still happened. And we we decided against it. As Mike said earlier, we talked about that, but then just decided to work with our group, our community, and Danny is obviously a very valued member of that, and I it's great to hear from listeners that they like sort of this big diversity that we offer, and that it's encouraging them to sort of expand their horizons and have new things to try. And every once in a while I'll try new things too, and that's about once every other year, and I've already
we're slowly chipping away at that mountain.
Yeah.
I mean, I said my piece here, but like this is crazy. A lot of the slots for our $10 tier are gone. People have some dedicated options they want to. Thank you. This is amazing. I guess I don't know, to wrap up this show, we're gonna do a Q&A, I think, after the credits, but still, I'm really excited for what's gonna happen after 300, and I hope that everybody is on board for some really fun stuff. Looking forward to these commissioned episodes. This is gonna be amazing, and I think that pretty much wraps everything up. So. Shit. Next week's episode is going to be about witches in comics, the best, the worst, the weirdest, with Kate and Kate. I think we're going to be recording at a different time. I think we're aiming for 3 p.m. next week just because of some scheduling stuff. So if you want to listen live, make sure you check in at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard. But we're going to be talking about witches. I'm going to be going hard into all of Mega Hex. So get ready for some disgusting stuff.
Yes. Oh my God.
Anyways, you guys can, people are very excited for which episode. You can follow Paul on Twitter at OhiPauly. You can follow Nick at Death Star Plans. You can follow me at Mike Rappin, and you can follow the show at IRCB Podcast on Twitter and Instagram.
This episode first aired on Patreon and is possible because of our wonderful patrons. Join today for exclusive series like IRCB Movie Club, Saga of Saga, and much more, which we talked about extensively already in this episode. You can do that by joining now at patreon.com/IRCB Podcast. And if you haven't already, please take a minute to rate and review the show. I think 5 stars is a fair rating. You can do that on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, wherever you listen to podcasts. It honestly does help the show and help us spread the word about IRCB.
You can join the IRCB Discord community to chat comics and more and listen to our episodes live as we record. And it would help us a lot if you tell your friends or your local comic shop about the show.
Infinity Shred is the best band in the universe. They do all of our music, and they're going to continue to do all of our music. They are amazing. Xander is a very cool guy who makes us sound very cool. I can't wait to hear this interview thing that he's doing. So everybody look forward to that as well on top of this episode. And until next time, I want to say thank you to everyone who's listening live, all 8 or 9 or 10 of you. There was a bunch of people at one point. Thank you to Paul and Nick for doing this episode. Thank you to everyone out there who listens to our show and shares, and everyone who supports us on Patreon. You are all fantastic human beings, and we would not be doing the show if it wasn't for all of you. So until next time, comics are good, and so are you. Anything else? Anything you guys want to go over? Any questions you have? Any thoughts?
I'm along for the ride, Mike.
Okay. Appreciate that. Yeah. Paul, you are my ride or die. I appreciate that.
The Paul Walker to your Vin Diesel. So
yeah,
was that a thing? Were they both baby faces in that movie, or was one the heel? I don't know.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, if you watch the series, I mean, like, Vin Diesel does go from like good guy to heel back to good guy. Like, it's
okay.
Paul.
There's a heel turn.
If you take the Fast and the Furious franchise and you approach it with the mindset of it being like wrestling, I think you might love it. I think you might, because especially when The Rock shows up and John Cena shows up, Paul, this all makes sense.
That's true. That's true. If I could just fast forward through all the dumb car chases, then
right. The car chases are the cage matches, right?
The Paul Jasley edit where it's 12 minutes.
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah. So Paul is Paul's the Paul Walker to my Vin Diesel. Nick, are you the Tyrese, or I don't know where you fit. Are you the Ludacris?
I don't know enough.
Anybody else out there have any thoughts?
Sort of the...
No idea.
Nick is Ludacris. Okay, that's what Danny says. Okay. Sounds good. That does put you in a pretty cool spot. I think Danny gave you a nice compliment there, because Ludacris is probably one of the coolest guys in the series. And whatever. I'm not going to try to cast the rest. I'm going to leave that to the chat.
Jack can do the rest of the fan casting. But
so
I feel qualified. I played like 400 hours of Need for Speed Underground, so Xander can relate.
Right.
2,000 kids know what I'm talking about.
I mean, I played Need for Speed 2 so much that's how I knew every word to that one song. Hot in Here? No.
God.
The Usher song. I don't know. There was an Usher song that was like the song for one of the Need for Speed games. And my brother and I would just play that game. And that was like the only song that would ever play. Or I think we left it on the main menu, which just looped through that one song.
Like, or like you filtered the EA soundtrack so that it only played that song. Like kids who played video games in the early 2000s know what we're talking about, where like you played the EA games and they came with this soundtrack and like you loved like 3 of the songs and you hated the rest. And people can either say they don't know what I'm talking about or what, but like I have fond memories of there were some Story of the Day songs on one of those games that I just loved.
What's that Goldfinger song that just you put over any
from
skateboarding
Tony Hawk,
video?
Superman?
Superman.
Yeah, everybody, yeah. Come on, everybody knows that.
Anyways, all right, let's before we go down the nostalgia path even further, maybe that'll be the new Patreon series. It'll just be like nostalgia fodder, and we'll do 30 minutes of us doing that.
BuzzFeed listicles.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about turning the show just into a series of BuzzFeed listicles, but
hey, kids, let's talk about Tamagotchis for a 40-minute think piece.
Exactly. All right, let's do this thing. Let's take a couple seconds. We'll get into this.